Okay. Question number 9 in the name of Deputy Charlie McConalogue.
Minister, this is to ask you your plans in relation to providing broadband under the National Broadband Plan for the 78 areas of Donegal which have been identified as requiring state intervention in order to have appropriate broadband facilities delivered. And also, Minister, if you can give us timelines, please, as to when you expect that work to commence. Thank you.
The National Broadband Plan will deal conclusively with the rural connectivity issues so that current and future generations will have a guaranteed access to high-quality, high-speed broadband. The network we wish to see built will therefore have to be scalable and capable of meeting future anticipated traffic growth. Whatever the technology used, it must ensure users have a minimum service of 30 megabytes per second, and that this can also meet future anticipated growth in traffic and consumer demand. In line with the EU competition rules, we must observe a policy of technology neutrality in any state intervention in a competitive market. However, the scale of the government's ambition in regard to the level of service we wish to see available in rural areas, the step change in broadband quality demanded by the EU Commission's state aid guidelines, the exponential growth in demand from consumers, the ongoing significant improvement in services that is now available to many urban dwellers and businesses through commercial investment, as well as the current fibre deficit in much of rural Ireland, all of these factors can point to a major role for fibre in resolving this issue. In line with the provisions of the state aid guidelines, we are likely to adopt an approach that will see fibre networks as close as possible to end users. Through a variety of technology platforms, retail telecommunications providers would then be able to use this wholesale network to offer services to the final consumer. In April last, Minister Rabbitte announced that as a first step it was clear that at least 1,100 villages would require fibre backhaul connectivity, 78 of which were in County Donegal. Since last April, Eircom have announced that 2 of these villages, Carrick and Guidor, will be covered under their e-fibre rollout. The remainder of the villages in Donegal remain firmly part of the programme. There are 2,644 townlands in Donegal and 52,004 premises, of which 52% will be covered by the state-led intervention and 48% will receive high-speed broadband by the commercial sector by the end of 2016.
Deputy McConalogue.
Thank you, Concordat, and thank you, Minister, for your reply. Minister, you haven't given any timelines in your response in relation to how you expect this to be rolled out. And unfortunately, people outside the main cities, Minister, are becoming increasingly frustrated at the fact that broadband is not being delivered, and also that they don't see a real timeline as to when it will be delivered. For places like Donegal, Minister, and you pointed out in your response that 52% of the households in Donegal will require state intervention in order to have sufficient level of broadband connectivity delivered. For those people, they do not see light currently at the end of the tunnel, Minister, and for something such as broadband, which should be bringing counties like Donegal and other peripheral regions much more central in terms of its connectivity to the world, reducing the fact that we would have been traditionally peripheral, because if you have proper broadband facilities, you can work from anywhere. But despite that, we are actually, through the broadband era and as it develops, falling further behind, Minister, because we're not actually achieving that. And I'll give you one example. Recently, for example, the town of Moville, which over recent months has seen regular outages where the limited broadband which is available has been down for a couple of days at a time. That's the type of environment we're expecting growth and businesses to try and be developed in. But without you ensuring that delivery quickly, Minister, it's not going to be feasible. Thank you.
I didn't hear didn't pick up quite the last comment the Deputy made, but of course it is the case that broadband has been and is provided at the moment by the private sector and not by the state. But the state will intervene to ensure that areas that the private sector won't go to and the commercial sector won't go to, we'll have a state intervention to fill that gap. And that, I think, is an important role for the state. But at present, it's a matter for the private sector a matter for the private sector, whether it's in Donegal or any other county of Ireland, to supply broadband. But we must intervene, because we know that the commercial sector, and this is a critical role for the state, to intervene where the commercial sector won't go itself. Now, we had a mapping consultation launched in November. On the timelines, we launched a mapping consultation in November. Allows every citizen of the country, whether business or private, to look and see where they feature in terms of the likely future availability of broadband. Private sector in the so-called blue areas, and the rest really the state will have to do. And 52% of Donegal will have to be done by the state, and it will be done by the state. But it's effectively like the equivalent of building out a road network of 100,000 kilometres.
Thank you.
We have to get state aid approval this year. That will take a number of months. There are a list of questions that we're addressing at the moment we'll have addressed by the summer. State aid approval by the end of the year, a competitive tendering process, and then a contractor or contractors in place in 2016. It'll then take them 3 years to build the thing out, 100,000 kilometres. But we'll get on with it.
Deputy McConalogue.
Yeah, that's best case scenario, Minister. You're talking about 2016, 2017 before anything actually starts to get delivered. That'll mean that it'll be 2020 and beyond for many regions before they actually get proper fibre broadband. I mean, that's a very misfortunate story to actually have to be able to tell to those regions that it's going to take that long while the rest of the country is moving ahead. Little can happen in relation to business development or indeed being able to enjoy the type of services that broadband is essential for now in those areas. Unfortunately, we are nearly 4 years into this government, and you're doing a mapping exercise at this stage. Things have moved exceptionally slowly. Little more will have moved over the next year. It has been clear for a long time now that in many parts of this country, broadband would not be delivered without state intervention. Yes, there's plenty of parts, the urban centres, etc., and areas around that which it would have been debatable as to whether or not the private sector would become involved or not, and you were to let that see what happened as such. But there is so many areas where it's always been clear that state investment will be required, yet we are now only at this stage. And I would emphasise to you, Minister, the importance actually of trying to ensure this proceeds without delay, because areas are falling further and further behind as a result of the fact of it not being delivered.